I have made it clear I will not testify against the president because I would have to bear false witness against him. I am one of his oldest friends. I am a fervent supporter of the president. I think he is doing a great job of making America great again.
Welcome back. That was Roger Stone on the steps of the federal courthouse in Fort Lauderdale this morning, not far from where he lives, vowing he would never testify against President Trump. That, of course, has been a promise that's been made and broken by other past Trump associates, perhaps most famously Michael Cohen, who at one time said he'd take a bullet for Donald Trump. That's not the case anymore. Joining me now is Carol Lee, NBC News national political reporter. Our friends Chuck Rosenberg and Evelyn Farkas are still with us. Anna Schechter is joining this conversation, NBC investigative reporter who's been covering all things Roger Stone as well. So let me begin with the idea that Stone, Carol Lee, would never turn against the president. Look, Roger Stone is one of the few people alive who the first Trump he met was Fred, not Donald. Okay, so this is how far back they go. But we saw Michael Cohen flip.
Right, but I think your first point is the key point. I mean, this is Roger Stone. Not only the relationship is so much deeper, but he's just a different animal. You know, he's a different type of person. He's a showboat. He's, you know, his whole persona is built around being defiant and being in your face. And so it would really collapse everything that he's basically stood for decades.
I mean, I was just going to say, I'm hoping the team will put up the Nixon thing. I mean, that was Roger Stone. Right. That was quintessential Roger Stone.
He has a tattoo of Nixon on the back of his neck. I mean, I covered him when I was a reporter in Florida. He was always up to something, always trying, you know, telling you he had something and this was happening. So the idea, and, you know, I'm sure Chuck, you've heard millions of times people say, I'm never going to flip, I'm never going to flip. But he's just a little bit different, and in that sense. And if you're looking at just this, he also, the first thing he said when he came out was, it's better to be talked about than not be talked about. And the
Sound familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. And the way that he would be talked about if he were to flip and cooperate is just not the kind of thing that it goes completely against his whole MO.
The president himself tweeted this morning, greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. No collusion, that was in all caps. Border coyotes, drug dealers, and human traffickers are treated better. Oh, by the way, who alerted CNN to be there? Chuck Rosenberg, you have been very upset by the way some have been trying to portray what the FBI did, and explain why what you believe that the FBI did, why it was so appropriate in how they brought Roger Stone into custody.
And by the way, Carol, I was about to get a Nixon tattoo, but I'm gonna hold off for now.
You look like a tattoo kind of guy.
Yeah. So I don't even think it's a close call, Chuck, with respect to the propriety of the FBI arresting Roger Stone. Here's why. Even though it may be a first offense, even though it seems kind of like a white-collar criminal-ish thing, he's also charged with witness tampering. Read the indictment. Read page 20. He tells one of the witnesses he's going to go after his dog, and then he says, prepare to die, expletive. You could fill in the blank. I mean, if you're the FBI, if you're a federal prosecutor, you do not tolerate that kind of behavior, nor do you risk that if you hand the man a summons, he won't actually make good on that threat. That's not the kind of risk you take as a federal agent. And so you ask a court for an arrest warrant. And the court in this case granted it, and the FBI executed it properly. With guns, you bet. FBI agents carry weapons. That's how they roll. And so I don't even see this as a close call. I think that outcry about the propriety of arresting Roger Stone is nonsense.
Anna, you have, I think you're our foremost expert on Jerome Corsi. Whether that's something you want on your resume in 20 years, we can decide upon that. What Rogers, when he was witness tampering, it was Jerome Corsi and this Randy Credico that he was somehow trying to shape their testimony. Walk us through that relationship, and why is a Jerome Corsi, for instance, defending Mueller today, while also saying, I'm praying for my friend Roger Stone, but Mueller is telling the truth?
This is really interesting when you read through the indictment and you see all of the lies that Roger Stone told the congressional committee, because he said he had no communication with Randy Credico or Jerome Corsi, but he actually gave me exclusive access to multiple text messages with Randy Credico, the radio host who had some connection to a lawyer for Julian Assange. So it's really interesting how, in trying to protect his narrative, he remembered telling the congressional committee that Randy Credico, in a supplemental testimony, was his back channel to WikiLeaks. And so he wanted to make sure that that was the narrative, and he felt that by showing these text messages, it proved that point. And yet it flew directly in the face of what he told congressional committees. So he's probably wondering about his strategy. The fact is, Mueller got his hands on all of the communications between him and Randy Credico and him and Jerome Corsi. Now, Stone goes back a long time with both of these men, and he considered them friends until he started to, one, intimidate Randy Credico and try to get him to not tell investigators that he was, in fact, the back channel. And then with Jerome Corsi, they've more recently fallen out. Once Jerome Corsi started to talk about how he provided a cover story for Roger Stone about that Podesta's time in a barrel, Stone turned on him. Classic MO, all over social media, smearing Corsi as a liar and somebody working with Mueller. So Corsi today says he was shocked by the arrest. He's praying for Roger Stone, and yet he still might sue him for defamation next week.
Would you portray Corsi, Anna, as a patsy here? Or would you portray him as somebody who was maybe a little wanting to be bigger than he was?
I think you could actually use that characterization for all three of these men, Roger Stone, Randy Credico, and Jerry Corsi.
I think that is a fair point. The other riddle that we were trying to answer today, and Evelyn, I want you to weigh in on this, and everybody, is why is Roger Stone so careful in what he says in public television interviews, and yet so careless with what he told Congress? Listen to how precise his denials are to me in two different interviews involving questions I had about WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign. Take a listen.
And I can say with confidence that I know nothing about any Russian collusion or any other inappropriate act, that I never had any advanced knowledge of the content, the source, or the exact timing of the WikiLeaks disclosures. There is no evidence whatsoever that I had advanced knowledge of the content or source of this material. I received nothing from WikiLeaks or from the Russians. I passed nothing on to Donald Trump or the Trump campaign. We've been through this ad nauseum. It is a wild goose chase.
So, Evelyn, first of all, at that point in time, for what it's worth in 2016, how confident do you feel as if the world should have known that WikiLeaks was nothing but a Russian front?
I mean, I believe the world should have known that WikiLeaks was nothing but a Russian front because, you know, we had some of the evidence out there. First of all, how did they get the DNC emails when the media was covering it, the print media and the television media? There was a question, you know, how did they get these emails, right? And everybody figured that the hack was probably from a state entity, probably from Russia. That was already out there. That was already public. And Julian Assange and his kind of coordination with Russia was also something that was public. Of course, the intelligence community knows more that they can't talk about in terms of what they know about Assange's collaboration with Russia. But the world saw that these hacked emails that the Russian government got were released by WikiLeaks. I mean, the Russian government picked WikiLeaks. If you don't need any other evidence, that should be sufficient. Although I'm sure if they picked NBC, we wouldn't be accused of being complicit. So there is something to be said for that. But what happened then was, of course, that they dribbled it out on a schedule, WikiLeaks meaning, dribbled it out on a schedule that must have been coordinated with someone, and certainly based on the tweets and the conversations, the email and text conversations that we now know that Roger Stone had, he had some awareness of it.
Chuck Rosenberg, you heard that. He's very specific about what he says WikiLeaks did and didn't do. You know, they didn't hand me information. They didn't. It seems as if he was more careful with us than he was, frankly, with Congress.
Well, he was more careful with you than he was with Congress. I mean, for instance, he flat out lied to Congress, and he only sort of lied to you.
Right.
But
Did he? I wonder if he's either got better at it or he's figuring out a story.
yeah, not clear. But where did we go in order to find what he really knew and what he really did? His emails and his text messages. Criminals are just not careful in the end because they cannot keep up with all their lies. And over again, where do prosecutors look? At emails. That's where the truth tends to lie. I don't mean that as a pun. That's where you find the truth.
The truth tends to lie. You're right, but it could have been a great pun. Anyway, Carol, Chuck, Evelyn, Anna, thank you all. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.